Today, I am joined by Senator Ron Johnson to go through some questions that I believe my MAGA, Republican, conservative voters want to know. Senator Johnson, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on.
So I want to talk about Social Security, some really negative things that Democrats are saying about you and the GOP. But first thing I wanted to ask you about, you kind of rose to fame, at least with me, on having President Trump's back with the Russia hoax, and then just digging in diligently on COVID, the cover-up, Pfizer, Moderna, Fauci, all of that. Do you have any other investigations that you and those around you are working on?
Well, I mean, right now we're going to try and close out some of those things. Hopefully we'll get the kind of documents that have been denied us during the Biden administration. But, quite honestly, I think the deep state knows how to hide and destroy documents. And I'm not sure how much closure we're actually going to get, but we'll try. So, again, it would be nice to take care of the whole Crossfire Hurricane, Russia collusion gate, all those types of things. I think my primary emphasis should be on, our miserably failed response to COVID, the lies that were told, all the harm done, the freedoms denied to people because of our response to COVID. And so I've written over 70 oversight letters to federal health agencies, primarily under the Biden administration. Really didn't get squat from them. Now that RFK Jr. is promising radical transparency, I want to take advantage of that. But as dedicated as he is to radical transparency, again, the deep state moves slowly. There is 16 ways on Sunday they can frustrate my and RFK Jr.'s efforts, and they're doing everything they can right now to frustrate those efforts. So we're getting some documents. We're going to hold our first hearing. The working title, Corruption of Science and the Federal Health Agencies, How They Hid Myocarditis and Other Adverse Events. Based on a report we're going to release of FOIA documents that we received unredacted, so we can just paint a little bit cleaner picture of how our federal health officials pretty well hid myocarditis, even they knew about it pretty early on, and proceeded with recommending it to the young, even though they knew there was real danger.
Do you think that just came down to money? Because I would think, as a brand, Pfizer, good reputation in the past, great brand name, highly traded stock, and yet they were willing to risk it all to what? Make $100 a shot with the government paying the bill? I just don't understand why they would risk their reputation to continue to inject people with something they knew was so damaging.
Well, one thing I've discovered now that, I started questioning the COVID injections, they're not vaccines, but there literally is a quasi-religion around vaccines. And I can understand the appeal. I mean, if you can just give somebody a completely safe shot that prevents you from getting a disease, I mean, how good is that? The problem is the reality doesn't really match that kind of fairy tale description of what's happening. And, because we gave vaccine manufacturers complete and absolute liability, basically, they have a huge financial incentive of rolling out more and more and more vaccines. So now the number of vaccines a child gets is, orders of magnitude more than they used to get, basically. And we haven't ever tested one of these vaccines on the childhood schedule against a true placebo, which means you're testing them against another vaccine that might also have adverse events. So if they're comparable, you go, well, this one's safe too, if you judge the first one safe. So anybody who questions it has been labeled an anti-vaxxer. They get termed as discredited. And, so very few people were willing to step up and just question, what is causing autism? What's causing all these autoimmune diseases? What's causing all this chronic illness? But I give President Trump and Bobby Kennedy a great deal of credit, both of them, for setting aside their political differences and focusing on an area of agreement of trying to find the answers to those questions.
Yeah, I agree. I look forward to whatever they come up with. I just want to know the answer. The fact that some people don't want to know the adverse event of vaccines, where autism, is it big food? Is it big pharma? Is it big chemical? Is it something completely different? Like, I just want to get to the bottom of that. Let me ask you this. Democrats are saying that Trump is ruining Social Security, yet DOGE and President Trump found and removed millions of fraudulent people receiving and cashing monthly checks. From my estimates, it's almost $140 billion a year saved. if fake and fraudulent names are removed and that money's not coming out of the Treasury, doesn't that actually help strengthen Social Security?
Well, the first answer to your question is Democrats lie. So that's why they're saying all these things, but it's just a big lie. It always has been a big lie. I don't know of any Republican that wants to cut Social Security benefits. I don't know any Republican that wants to end Social Security. There are those of us who have accurately described Social Security as a legal Ponzi scheme, because that's what it is. You know, Ponzi scheme is nothing more than you extract money from investors. You don't actually save that money, invest it. You just pay out earlier investors. That's what's happening with Social Security. So the trust fund is a fiction. It just has U.S. government bonds that have no value to the federal government, because when the trustees turn those bonds over to the Treasury Department, they just have to float more debt. So again, the American people have been lied to about Social Security. The Democrats are lying to the American people about what Republicans want to do to Social Security. We want to save it. We want to preserve. We want to honor those promises. And the best way of doing that is eliminate all waste, fraud, and abuse. I was at an event where Elon Musk said that 40% of the calls that come to Social Security are an attempt to defraud a Social Security recipient. You'll get the check to be mailed to a different address. That's pretty amazing statistic. And so, no, I mean, I appreciate the fact. I think, by the way, DOGE is a brilliant effort. Not only is it identifying and exposing just grotesque examples of waste, fraud, and abuse, it's also exposing how clueless, how oblivious Congress, I'd say most administrators in the administration, the general public, is to the grotesque levels of waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, they're not even scratching the surface, is my belief. So that's why I've been saying we literally have to do a forensic audit on the entire federal budget, go through line by line by line. That's thousands of lines, and evaluate every expenditure. But we've never been willing to do that. We just take a look at what we spent last year, just bump it up by a few percent, and call it a day.
Yeah. I think DOGE has been great. Let me throw this at you. Democrat Senator Chris Murphy says President Trump and his desire to lower taxes will kill the country. It's a money grab for his billionaire buddies. He also said if they need to rack up $1 trillion bill on a middle-class credit card in order to finance tax cuts for their wealthy friends, they are willing to do it every single time. Are the tax cuts Trump wants for working class, middle class, is it actually just to benefit billionaire buddies off the back of the middle class? Or is this just a giant lie?
Well, again, the new tax cuts would be focused on working men and women in this country. You know, what we're trying to do is not increase anybody's taxes. You know, a mistake, I would say a blunder of the 2017 bill is that parts of it automatically expire. The vast majority expire in 2026. And so every American that paid taxes that got a tax cut in 2017, 2018, will see their taxes increase if we don't extend current tax law. That's not cutting taxes for the wealthy. It's just making sure that no American gets a massive tax increase, an automatic one, which could really harm economic activity as well. So, yeah, Democrats are lying one more time.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly their lies spread. And you know, when you have the mainstream media as your megaphone, they do a good job. I know you're in the Senate. Over in the House, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries has called your GOP spending bill a toxic scheme to hurt the middle class. Jeffries says he will fight you and the GOP to keep your hands off working Americans that are struggling. What is he talking about? Doesn't the spending bill help Americans? What are your thoughts on his words?
Well, again, he's using rhetoric and demagoguery. He's not telling the American people the truth. You know, my biggest problem with what's occurring right now is we're not returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic spending baseline. We're not even coming close. The greatest threat to every American, and particularly low-income or middle-income Americans, is a debt bomb going off. If we have a failure of the Treasury auction where creditors look at the U.S. as we're trying to roll over $9 trillion of the $37 trillion this year, if creditors say, yeah, you're too risky, I'm not going to buy those bonds, and we have a a failure of the bond market, that could spark a debt crisis. We're already seeing the inklings of what a debt crisis looks like. A dollar you held at the start of the night in 2019, before the pandemic, is now worth 80 cents. By the way, a dollar you held in 1998, 26 years ago, 27 years ago, is now worth 51 cents. So that's the silent tax, inflation, the devaluation of the dollar. That crushes low and middle income Americans. The wealthy, they can tolerate it. They have their assets in stocks that are driven higher by inflation. So it's really that just incredible, awful tax of inflation, devaluation of the dollar, and that's spurned by deficit spending. So right now our deficit is close to $2 trillion. Over the next 10 years, according to CBO's latest estimate, we're going to add about $22 trillion to the debt. We're already spending $1 trillion on interest alone, which exceeds what we spend on the top priority of government, national defense. So my problem with the big, beautiful bill is I analyze it, it would actually increase the deficit probably by about $4 trillion. Again, nobody knows what's going to happen in the economy, so you have to make assumptions based on projections, but you just kind of look at that static view. If we don't allow the tax increase like CBO is, that's about $3.7 trillion. Tack on another $1.5 trillion of tax cuts for middle income Americans, only cut $1 trillion and spend $342 billion on defense and border security. That adds $4 trillion over time. So what I proposed is a reasonable pre-pandemic level spending rather than $7 trillion. The most we ought to be spending would be 6.5. And by the way I get that, two ways: either percent of GDP that we spent in 2016, that would put us at about $6.5 trillion, or take President Trump's actual outlays, other than Social Security, Medicare, and interest. You use 2025 numbers for that. Grow all those other outlays by interest, by inflation and population increase. End up with $6.5 trillion. So no matter how you calculate it, that's the most we ought to be spending in 2026.
Okay. Let me ask you a personal question. Is it ever extremely frustrating having to try to save the government based on all the stuff parties have done to the government in the past? I mean, very little of this is your problem, but a lot of it is your responsibility. Is that ever overwhelming or frustrating?
Well, it's enormously frustrating. I often say nobody can out-frustrate me. I'm sure people can, but politically, no, I'm a highly frustrated individual here because it drives you nuts. So some of these things wouldn't be that hard to fix. I mean, for example, to return to a pre-pandemic level of spending, I just wrote in my Wall Street Journal column. In World War II, we started the war spending 11.7% of GDP on federal government, 11.7. We ramped that up during the war to 41%. But fortunately, back then, we had adults running things, and Truman and Congress realized we got to return to pre-war spending levels. I think by 1948, we were down to 11.4% spending of GDP. Right now, we're spending about 23.3%. We're raising 17.1% revenue. That's close to a 6% structural deficit gap. You can't continue that. So that's why I don't want to solve that by increasing taxes. I'm okay with increasing taxes by growing our economy where people are having greater success, and so that whatever the tax rates are, that just generates more income. That's an okay way to raise revenue. We need to close the deficit by reducing spending to a reasonable pre-pandemic spending level. We increased spending 58% since 2019 over 6 years, while our population grew at under 3%. I mean, again, there's no justification to continue spending at this level. And by the way, I don't think President Trump's voters expected us to continue spending at Biden's levels, literally codify or confirm Democrat priorities and programs, policies. I mean, that's basically what we're doing by not rolling back Medicaid expansion. Medicaid, that's Obamacare, by the way. Medicaid was supposed to be a shared responsibility, state and federal government, so the states who administer it, police it, don't allow fraud, don't allow overspending, or at least try and control it. Basically a 40-60 split. Obamacare, and by the way, for disabled and disadvantaged individuals, okay, the people that we all want to help. Obamacare put single, able-bodied, working age, childless adults in there, and we pay 90 cents on the dollar, which has caused states to completely game the system. So now they tax providers, or they charge provider fees. So that's not healthcare. That's just a fee the government charges healthcare providers. They pay it to the states. The states say, hey, you got to pay us now 9 cents on the dollar. They take that and then they return the fee to the providers. I mean, it's a total scam. It's money laundering. It's legal fraud, but it doesn't look like we're really going to take care of that in the House bill.
Okay. It does or doesn't?
It doesn't. No, I think they're pretty well taking a pass on that.
Wow. Okay. Let me throw this at you. Democrat Frank Pallone said, in no uncertain terms, millions of Americans will lose their health care coverage. Hospitals will close. Seniors will not be able to access the care they need, and premiums will rise for millions of people if this House bill passes. Is this just fear mongering, or are they trying to mix in like, hey, if they take out the people that shouldn't be there, it's going to hurt everyone, when in fact, if you take out the people that shouldn't be there, it actually benefits everybody? The lies make me so crazy.
Well, first off, if you enforce work rules, the good news there is people will get a job and they'll get insurance through their employer. That's a good thing. You've made one more person less dependent on the federal government, which is, again, it's not a good thing to be dependent on the federal government. Also, if you take an illegal immigrant off Medicaid, that's going to save and preserve Medicaid for the truly disadvantaged Americans that it's designed to protect. So, yeah, I mean, if you reduce spending on Medicaid from a federal and state level, people will probably lose Medicaid, but it's generally the people that we really didn't want on Medicaid anyway. Able, working age, single, childless adults that ought to have a job. But right now we're making it very easy for them to sit on the couch, play their video games, and do nothing and get their health care taken care of and get food stamps and get all kinds of other benefits. That's got to end. We simply can't make Americans dependent that way anymore.
Okay. One more question. I appreciate coming on. I know how busy you are today. If DOGE had free access to all of the government, unfettered access, where do you think they would find the most fraud? Dr. Oz believes it's going to be anything that touches medical. Have you given any thought to where you think the most fraud is?
Well, first of all, that's where most of the money is spent.
Okay.
And misspent. And again, one of the reasons that we are so dissatisfied with our healthcare system and education, these are two areas of our economy where we have largely driven the benefits of free market competition out of them. With monopoly power of teachers unions in K through 12, a quasi oligopoly, I'd say, in higher education, but in healthcare, the third-party payer system. So you don't have consumers even knowing. The providers don't know what things cost. So there's no consumer control. Free market guarantees the highest possible quality, the best level of customer service, and the lowest possible price and cost. That's what competition and free market capitalism yields. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than any other system. You get third-party payers in there. Consumers don't know. They don't care what they pay for something. They care what their insurance costs, but they're just not price shopping. They're not being wise in terms of, I just had that procedure. I don't think I need another x-ray or whatever. Consumers would definitely control price. Plus, as Bobby Kennedy says, if we can really get to the root cause of chronic illness, that's something like 75% of all of our healthcare spending is on chronic illness, which benefits big pharma, which benefits the health industry. If we could keep Americans healthier, that's the greatest savings is right there in healthcare. And I think it's entirely possible. I haven't been smart. I love, I won't name the producer, but I love junk food. I'm really cutting back. I'm looking at whole foods. I'm trying to understand that it's all about metabolism. It's about efficiently processing the food into the energy that our bodies need to heal and repair itself. I mean, I'm looking at this entirely different than I ever have. And quite honestly, I feel a whole lot better eating healthier.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, that's good. You're setting an example. I know you need to run. Thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you coming on the show, but I especially appreciate you fighting for us there in Congress. We'll have you on again. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Stay well.